First of all, I just want to thank you all for joining me for this panel. I'm very excited to talk to you all. I feel like you all represent, I call it the new guard, not saying like y'all are new attorneys, but I feel like y'all represent something different in this music business. So I'm just very happy to have you all together. And it's just, always a pleasure working with you all for sure. We can kind of start maybe with you, Vinny. What drove you to become an entertainment attorney, and how did that passion, how did you get started? What was your passion to get you there to where you
So,
are now?
so I don't know if I told you this, but I used to make beats back in the day. I used to produce for artists back when I was in high school and college.
Okay.
So at the same time, I was, my family, my mom and dad are both doctors. And actually now my wife is a doctor. But, that was kind of the path that I was on. I was a biochem major, and I kind of changed my mind, and I wanted to stay in music somehow. And I can't remember who it was that I read about, but I was reading about some article where I saw another entertainment lawyer talking about what they do. And then I thought that would be a really cool way to kind of stay in it,
Mm-hmm.
still be around creatives, but be able to do something professional. And it was kind of cool because jumping in like that, I already had like a lot of experience in the studio, working all over the place. And actually, when my first internship was with Teddy Riley, so I wasn't doing
Ooh.
anything. I wasn't doing anything legal at the time. I used to, he used to stay up all night making tracks. I used to sit next to him and help him get his sounds together and organize all of his
What?
sounds.
Oh my
Yeah, so it was
God. In VA? In Virginia?
in Virginia Beach. Yep. Yep.
Did you create
Oh,
songs that Vanilla
okay.
found?
Are you from there?
I'm from
Are you from
Richmond.
there?
I'm from Richmond. I'm from
I didn't
Richmond.
know that. Oh, you got Virginia going in here. Okay.
I didn't know
You're from
that.
Richmond too, Angela?
No,
Wow.
I went to Prince High School because my dad was in the military. He was in the Army.
Oh, no way.
So I went to high
Mine
school.
too. Oh, you an Army brat.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's
Yes.
interesting. I didn't
So I
know
mean,
so many
that's
of
go
you
ahead.
all have creative backgrounds. Like everyone's very artistic.
Yeah. Yeah, something I kind of noticed with a lot of, going to some of the entertainment law conferences. We do one in, it's called the North American Entertainment Sports Law Conference every year in November, and there's so many entertainment lawyers that are talented in some way that we have a talent show like the last night, so it's pretty funny.
Oh,
Yeah, so I think it's like
awesome.
a common thing among entertainment lawyers.
Awesome. Thank you, Vinny.
Yeah.
All right, Josh. Same question for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fairly similar to Vinny. It's actually funny. True story. Last night, I was putting my 10-year-old son to bed, and it was 1 o'clock in the morning, which is a very late bedtime for him. And he often wants to talk because he doesn't want to sleep. So he says to me last night, kind of out of the blue, he goes, "Dad, when did you decide you wanted to be an entertainment lawyer?" And I said, I don't know, somewhere between college and law school. And he said, "How come you decided to be an entertainment lawyer and not a rapper? Were your bars not strong enough?" And I was like, "Dude, what?" And he goes, "Did I just roast you?"
It's amazing.
So that's pretty much it, you know. I was always in and around music my entire life. You know, when I was a kid, I grew up in New York. I always was obsessed with music, particularly hip hop, and definitely tried my hand at different types of things on the creative side. By the time I got to college, like DJing really stuck. So I DJ'd all through college and after college and actually all through law school. But, always wanted to kind of just like figure out a way to get into the music business. And I interned at a label while I was in college and was always just kind of like trying to figure out what a good career path would be. By that same rationale, like my parents like always encouraged me to go to law school. I didn't really want to do that. And it was at some point, I think probably my senior year of college, that I learned, a number of people that went to the school within my college had done previous. There were a number of people who went to my school that wound up becoming entertainment lawyers. And I kind of started to learn about them as a senior from one of the career counselors. And I started to think, okay, maybe that could be a path for me. And wound up applying to law school straight out of college, got into a couple of schools, decided I didn't want to do that yet. And it was kind of getting ready to graduate from college, didn't really know what I was going to do. So I just kind of like last minute applied for a couple of jobs and wound up getting a job as a paralegal in a non-entertainment firm and went and did that for 2 years. Went back to living in Manhattan, or in the Bronx at the time. And really just like was a paralegal by day, and by night I would just go out like all the time and just try to get myself involved in whatever was going on. So I was going to a lot of shows, I was DJing a lot, I was hosting shows, I was trying to produce, I was just in and around artists constantly. And one of the common themes that kept on popping up is being around all of my artist friends, producer friends, etc. They would often ask me, they say, hey, you work at a law firm. What do you think about this? Or what do you think about that? And, I was a paralegal. I didn't know anything about what they were asking me, but it really just started to get my mind to a point where, you know what, I could do what these lawyers do. I could also figure out a way to apply it to, what I'm doing, which at the time started to turn into management. And then, eventually decided, all right, I am going to go to law school now. So after taking 2 years off between college and law school, I reapplied to law school. And the rest is history, I guess. There's a much longer, there's a much longer path to get to where I got to right now. But, that's how I decided to get there, essentially.
Awesome. Thank you, Josh. And Angela, how about you? I'm hit you with the same question.
So for me, when I was in undergrad, I was a marketing major, and I thought I wanted to do something in like advertising. That's the reason why I became a marketing major. But after like the first year or two, I was thinking of going into the field of music. And what I wanted to do, I wasn't sure. But I took this business law course, and it was really exciting. I loved it, but I knew I didn't want to just be like a lawyer that went to court, or did any of that. And I had, at the time, my sister had just got signed to a record label, and she had a friend, and they were like, oh, you should, if you're that interested in law, have you ever thought about being an entertainment attorney? And because my dad was in the military, we grew up in very like small towns that were by small cities, or out the country. I didn't know anyone that was in entertainment law. I didn't even know that was a profession. And I was like, oh, that seems like it'll be interesting. Maybe I should, like look into it a little bit more. So I interned at a record label my junior year in college, and I loved it. And I was like, I definitely want to do this, even though I didn't intern in a legal department at the record label. But it was at the time Sony Music had this minority internship program, and we got to meet with other interns that were working in different departments. So I would meet with people who were interning like in the legal department with, Epic and Columbia. So it was a really good experience. And then ever since then, I interned in New York at various law firms. And yeah, so I just went into it like I went into law school knowing that's what I wanted to do. And now it's, 15 years later and still doing it. So
Still doing it. Thank you, Angela. All right, John.
Same question. Cool. Yeah. So I have a artist background as well. I played in bands. I did tour managing. I did writing pretty extensively for probably 10 years during undergraduate and just after it. And I really just, I had no other hobbies. So I pretty much listened to music all day, every day. I played it. All my friends were musicians. One of my friends, a guy named John Strom, who's now president of Rounder Records, he practiced law for about 15 years before that. And we played in the same band in Birmingham, Alabama, when he was just getting started before he moved up to Nashville. And, I was sort of at a place in my life where I knew I didn't want to be, on the road. And I knew that, I pretty much had to do something arts related to be happy in my life. So I spoke with him, and he was like, "Hey, I also was an English major. I played in bands. I also got tired of being on the road. I went off to law school, and now I do entertainment law." And I was like, "Oh wow, well that sounds awesome." So that's the whole reason why I went back into law school at the age of, I think I was 27 when I went back, and I took all those classes. I graduated in 2010 when pretty much no one was hiring in that space. And I just hustled it out really because, there are certain people in this industry who we call lifers. They're just like those type of people that you kind of meet, people who send me an email that I may have, a cup of coffee with, who are interested in practicing entertainment law. And I can usually tell, just by interacting with them, which of them are really, really in this for life. And that's pretty much me. This was the only option that I had really. So I just didn't have a choice but to go out and kind of make it happen.
Thank you, John. Thank you. So, Matt.
Went to University of Georgia for undergraduate, so go Dogs, John C. Born and raised in Atlanta, Miami in 2008 for law school at University of Miami. Have been a talent advocate since I started law school. That's all I wanted to do for the past 6-7 years. I still have a place in an office in South Florida, and but prefer to spend my time residing in West Hollywood. I'm a 10-year classically trained pianist. I sing, play guitar, play bass, play drums in various sports, and then all the way to the collegiate level in box for the University of Georgia, actually. And I knew that this is exactly the space I wanted to be in.
So, in the title, one of my big things is the music industry. I feel like has changed a lot as far as the technology, as far as the ability for artists to make music and put it out almost immediately. And just in so many different ways to monetize, etc. But I feel like the business has not moved accordingly with the technological changes. So one of my major questions, and I'm just going to kind of throw it out there and we can just kind of talk about it and discuss it, is how do you feel about the music business, and do you agree with me that it hasn't progressed like the technology in the way that we do business? Does anybody want to jump in? Do I have to call on y'all?
You know what? I like the jump in method, right? Just everyone just say whatever. Well, with me, I think that it depends on what area. I think that when you look at deals the way they are now versus before, I mean, they're definitely, well, like 10 years ago, they're definitely more, I shouldn't say hands down, but I think that you see on a regular basis now more deals that are favorable for artists than before, because now artists have more options. And I had this conversation with Josh, probably months ago, we were talking about, just like the licensing deals, like you can get major labels now to offer, licensing deals or profit shares, whereas we weren't having as many of those conversations.
Angela, can you explain that? Just because, I mean, people might not know what you mean when you say a licensing deal or profit share.
So a licensing deal is where you own your masters and you're licensing the masters to the record label for a certain time period. So, previously deals were very much where the label would own the masters, and that's just how the deal works. Now you have a lot more companies that are willing to let you own the master after the deal's over. Well, basically own the master, but after the deal's over, after a certain period of time, you have rights to those records. So I think there's a lot more leverage now with artists being able to demand that. Um, so I think it just kind of depends. I mean, technology is constantly changing, and I do think when you look at where we are now with just like streaming, and the subscription services, we didn't have that 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So things are moving, maybe not as quick as we would like them on the legal front, but I do think that things are changing. And when you look at, like I said, 10, 15 years ago, the deals are, they're different. I mean, 15 years ago, the music business was in a bad place. So, I mean, it was hard to get a lot of the deals that we do now done. Whereas now we've, been able to find a way to monetize it. So I think that's going to keep changing.
What are
Yeah,
the rest
I
of
actually. Oh, am I on mute?
No, we
No.
can hear.
Oh, here we
Oh,
go.
we can hear you.
Okay, got it. Yeah, it's funny. I actually, I in my head, I give a lot of credit to Vinny's client Empire for really like pushing the narrative forward in how the majors do business. Like Angela said, 10 years ago, streaming and the subscription services weren't really a thing. So most deals were, traditionally structured, and the labels were still trying to figure out how to make money after, in the post Napster music industry. And I think that a couple of independent companies decided to be very nimble when it came to signing artists and offering non-traditional deals, and just putting out the product and seeing what happens and getting behind it, on a marketing level, not necessarily going immediately to radio or shooting, $1 million videos. And as the industry started to adapt to the streaming services, those companies showed the majors that there is a path back to real profitability. So I think as the money started to flow again in the business, which also coincided with the economy picking back up, because the economy was in a terrible place in 2010, 2009, whatever. And the label started to make money again. I think it got us to a new situation where the artists had a lot more leverage than they had before. You have artists like Chance the Rapper that decided to not go the major label route and had a lot of success, and you have numerous other artists that have signed to an Empire or an AWOL or did a deal with ADA, which are some of the non-major label distribution services, and have proven that they can be successful. So again, I think a lot of that forced the majors to reconsider how they were structuring the deals to attract some of those artists who might be making $500,000 a year staying independent. Like, how are we going to get these artists? Well, maybe instead of doing a traditional, we own the masters, we pay you a 15-point royalty deal, they started to consider, what? Maybe we'll let the artists own the masters. Maybe we'll do a 50-50 profit split, or even a 60-40 or a better profit split. So, I think we are seeing the labels adapt. I think we're in a really good time in the business for that.
Yeah, and I think the majors had to get less rigid with the way that they're negotiating deals because of the independent, labels, independent distributors being more flexible. So, when you have an independent putting up the same amount of money as a major, but letting you keep the rights to your masters, it's kind of, a different discussion,
And then even like on the independent side, you have, the labels had to figure out how they could compete with independents, because so many artists were putting out their music on their own and they were getting better terms. And then you have independents now, like, with Empire, where they're offering deals where they're putting six figures as, for advances and marketing budgets and spends on the table, where, before they were just doing distribution. So even independents are finding a way to, compete with, major labels now, which I think is great because again, like it all makes it beneficial for artists to have more options to put their music out and to make money. So, and then even publishing deals,
And
like
get
publishing changed. I mean, now you look at deals when you look back at some of the deals you did, like 10 years ago, and they're like some of the clients are in the first, initial period or option period, and all the deals now are everyone's pushing through it in 3-4 year deal. So yeah, I think it's a lot of change. So was
Matt, were you gonna
did
say
you?
something?
Oh no, I was just gonna jump in and just say too, what's amazing about that situation that AWOL, Cobalt, and also Empire have done so well for the community, the music industry, is also not only do we have these licensing deals that empower the artists to you know, control a lot of the business decisions, but primarily all of the creative decisions, and also can put whatever records they want to put, whatever materials, whatever assets they want to put out through that distributor versus being locked in exclusively for multi-album deals where all of the content runs through one company, and this allows them some kind of flexibility. And Vinny, I'm not just tuning your horn just because you're on the line, but I do love that Empire has such an amazing out as far as if with virtually very little notice, we can move to other companies and upstream and continue moving forward. And Empire and a lot of these distributors have helped these artists set the platform for us being able to do that.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things that Ghazi wanted to do early on. He didn't want people to feel like they were being held, but just being empowered. So that's why he structured it that way early on.
I think another thing that you're starting to see now, or over the course of the last couple of years, is that, especially in hip hop, the majors realized that in the downtimes, a lot of their signed artists were still putting out like street mixtapes in between albums, and they weren't able to monetize those pieces of product. So it would keep the artist hot, might get a song on the radio, and then the label would scramble to acquire the rights for it. It would allow the artist to continue to tour and keep their name relevant. But the majors weren't making any money off of it. So I think they've realized, and this could be a good thing or a bad thing. It can be argued either way. But they've the labels have realized, what? Let's let artists put out more product. The traditional record deal structure is it's one album every year and a half, and you might be in between cycles for a period of time while you're recording new material, and then often if you haven't put out new product, you got to go to the label and present the project. They're trying to figure out what the single is. They might send you back to the studio. Now I think there's a lot more trust with the artists, especially if the artist is like, hey, I just want to put these 12 songs out. The label will pay, they'll pay the producers. They might give you an additional advance. They'll kind of keep the flow going. And then also, when I started out in this business, every single deal was a 360 deal, where the label was asking for a piece of your touring, a piece of your merch, maybe even owning your merch, a piece of your endorsement deals, maybe even a piece of your publishing. And while some labels still do that, and again, you can argue the pros and cons of whether you should give your label access to those revenue streams or ownership of those assets. But now the labels are a lot more flexible in keeping that stuff out of the deal, or agreeing not to take a piece of touring until you make $1 million on every tour cycle, things like that. So I do think we've seen progress, especially over the last 5 years or so, in how deals are being structured.
One problem, though, that I see is that so many small, like truly small, independent, like fly-by-night labels, they pretty much always offer really just exploitative deals, and they still have all that 360 stuff in there, and sometimes they get to the artist first. So that's something I would like to see change, is to figure out a way to protect the big investment that they're making in a very risky industry very early on with artists, while at the same time getting them to to a space where they see they don't necessarily have to ask for absolutely everything and be, as super aggressive as they possibly can be across every aspect of their deals. And I've drafted those for clients too. So, we got to figure that out, I think.
One word, renegotiation.
Yeah, that's right.
Sure.
Yeah. Hate to
Yeah.
rely on it, but yeah, I mean, sometimes you have to say, okay, well, I mean, if some major label wants you, then that's an opportunity. We can always refuse to sign the inducement letter. Certainly there's not a major that wants to kind of force someone, into their system. So yeah, that definitely happens.
Yeah, I mean it's great. I mean, I hear a lot of optimism, and that things are getting better in some ways, as far as for artists and being able, like you said, the deals that artists are pushing through now, you could never get. I mean, if you have leverage, right? So that's the thing. I feel like those really good deals are reserved for certain people. And say you're an artist and you're building, what advice would you have for artists, especially now, in 2020? We're in the midst of an unprecedented pandemic. How how would you advise? How do you advise your clients now? And is there anything different that you're doing in light of what's going on right now? Or is it
Um,
just the same?
I think it's like with the pandemic, it's more so, just telling them like they're gonna have to still just find ways to push their music through different platforms, right? Like you have TikTok and there's different sites that people can use, but it kind of goes back to what John was saying when, you have some of these smaller labels and they will get very aggressive in their terms because they know they can, because the artist doesn't have that much leverage. They're in a space where maybe they don't have a way to, push their music. They clearly can't, go to a club and like have the DJ play it, or they can't, try to go on the road and do free shows. But yeah, they have to get creative with how they put their music out because, unless that's there's not much like we can do to, it's kind of like it take it or leave it deals. Like, hey, we have this offer for you. You don't have that much leverage, so the deal's not that great. Do you want to sign it or do you not? Or do you want to just stay, independent, truly independent, where you're not even signed to a small label and just keep, growing it. And that takes patience. And a lot of artists don't want to hear that. But I always say like you're going to get the best deal when you have more leverage. If not, it's going to be a take it or leave it. And then maybe in a year or two, or even before you put out an album, you'll regret it. But it's one of those decisions that I think artists just have to make. With they believe in themselves and what they're doing to do it on their own for a while, and then they can see what happens. But if not, yeah, they end up getting deals that aren't that great, even if we as attorneys negotiate it for them. There's only but so much we can even do. So
Well, the other thing that happens is that, I have artists all the time say, I'm going to stay independent. Like, I want to own all my stuff. And the very first time someone offers them a deal with like $5,000 attached to it, they're like, I want to sign it. Let's sign it. So I think that part of it is trying to kind of reach them at an early stage where, you can sort of instruct them on some things, hopefully help them get their business kind of set up so that they can start seeing some benefit from it. I mean, so many people aren't collecting any revenue streams whatsoever. So I think, it would be easier to hold them off from signing, a deal that's not in their best interest if they could see some benefit of what they're doing.
mhm. But that's the thing about like the entertainment business. It's like it's a risky business. There's like no guarantee. You like roll the dice and you just hope that everything's gonna work out. But when it comes to like I said, I have some artists who will call me all the time, like, hey, they really want to sign me. I want to do this deal. And it's like a company that, is giving, like, they're not offering great terms. And I tell them, like, look, you can take this deal or you can wait. But, at the end of the day, they have to make that decision for themselves, whatever they feel comfortable with, because you do have a lot of artists that are very, excited and impatient about just having to do it on their own. They just want to be able to get a deal to get the deal. But I, again, like it's, you tell people that can happen, but once you're kind of like locked in, you can be locked in for, a considerable amount of time. But I mean, I think that, one thing that's great about artists too is that they kind of control like what we're doing as far as how our business works. Because a lot of the ways that artists are being creative and putting out their music, like that dictates what we end up doing too. So, I think it's good that they kind of just stay on their own for a while and they figure things out, like how they can use the internet to get their music out, how they can use this downtime right now to still use that as a marketing tool. Yeah.
Ooh,
Yeah,
thank you.
I think,
So
I
I'm
think a
gonna
lot of
move. Oh, who's talking?
it was me, is Josh.
Oh, sorry, Josh. Go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off. I didn't hear you.
No, it's all good. I was just going to say, I think a lot of it, even for me as an attorney, like a lot of the decisions I make are based on gut. And you can't always necessarily predict what the future will be, right? Sometimes it makes sense for a developing artist to sign a development type of deal because the person who is signing them is so excited about it and has really laid out a very clear and thoughtful vision for that person. Other times people just get signed for a political reason, like, oh, we're friends with this manager. He has a new act. We don't really believe in it, but we just want to be friends with the manager. That might not necessarily be the best deal for the artist. And other times, an artist might have all the leverage in the world and they have one offer for one company for $3 million, another offer from another company for $2 million. Sometimes that $2 million deal might be the better deal for them. So it's like you kind of have to get a sense for the people that you're doing business with and really just have a good judge of character and have some sense for being able to see what the future is going to hold. And you can't always be right. Every situation, people ask me all the time, what do you think of this label? What do you think of that publisher? And it's like, I have clients who have completely different experiences with the same company, with the same people, so it's not necessarily always going to be the right fit for you.
I have to jump in on that because that is such a great point, Josh. I always advise clients, especially when it comes to publishing deals, management deals, and record deals, that all of these attorneys on this line right now, we're going to ensure that the black and white is to a point that we can very faithfully and respectfully advise our clients to sign. And once we've explained it and they understand the terms, however, we can't dictate the vibes. And that's I think kind of what you're getting to as far as the relationship aspect side of things, and making sure that we're signing to the right people and not necessarily just based on what that black and white reads.
Yeah, because it's funny. I've had very experienced attorneys, both on the artist representation side and at the label side, tell me once that contract's signed, it gets thrown in a drawer somewhere, and nobody looks at it ever again until there's a problem. And that's a little bit facetious and oversimplifying it, but I do think that a lot of the business people look at it that way. We as attorneys are fighting over, oh, you have to get our approval before doing X, Y, Z, or you have to, the formula for calculating the advance for the second album has to be done this way. But the truth is, it's like the business people at the labels are just saying, does this feel right or does this not feel right? They're not going, they don't have the faintest clue what it says in these contracts typically. And that's, that might be cynical, but it also often is what the reality is. And I joked about renegotiating before, but that's often what happens with success is you go renegotiate. And sometimes it's, easier said than done, obviously. But, a lot of the people at the table aren't concerned about what the contract says until there's a problem.
True, true. Thank you guys. So we're getting to 7:50, so I'm about to jump into some of the people's questions that we have, and I'm gonna just read the questions, and um, and then I'm going to let you all kind of jump in and answer how you want to. So the first question is: I'm a 5-year attorney. I opened my own entertainment law practice until my judicial mentors offered me first a bankruptcy clerkship and later a state appellate clerkship. How can I use this experience to market myself to get hired by either a law firm that represents entertainers or a film studio or TV network as a legal counsel? So I guess she's saying, how can she use her experiences in bankruptcy and state appellateship in entertainment to get hired?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, just having those sort of differing skills besides just being able to negotiate a contract is super important. So, having experience in litigation or having experience in bankruptcy or family law or any of these things are super important, because your clients, even if it's not your specialty, your clients are going to they're going to have some kind of issues that are not directly entertainment related, and you're going to want to be well rounded. So if you have some of that experience in some of the other areas of the law, I think it can be very useful to your overall representation of them. Even if you're not taking on the bankruptcy part, at least you kind of know how it goes, and then you can refer it to somebody else, but you can kind of get them through those initial steps.
Yeah, I agree. I think it definitely makes you more of a well-rounded attorney when you have that experience. Um, Getting to, I mean, just being, as far as my experience with people who are trying to get into entertainment, um, with networks or music companies, it is a lot harder to get in there if you don't have any type of entertainment like law experience. However, like probably like her going the route of working at a firm that specializes in entertainment, they would probably be more open to having someone that has different area of expertise, and then doing that for a couple of years with an outside firm, and then going into a, mu- a movie studio or a music label. I think that would probably be like a easier route. Not easier route, but like the best route to take.
Yeah, and then what do you think? Because she mentioned, film and TV. So looks like that's her interest. What do y'all think about as attorneys? The specialization of like just doing music or just doing TV or film. I mean, do you all kind of go into all of those areas, or do you mostly specialize in one?
So for me, I actually just started pretty much only doing music, which I feel very happy to be able to do that. I prefer that. I just started doing so much, really so much less film and TV work that each time someone hired me for it, I would get stressed out and relearn it, basically like what's changed since the last time I worked on one of these. And, whereas things on the music side, I mean, that's what I do all day, every day. So I pretty much started referring that work out now, unless it's an existing client or it's something that, I for sure already know how to handle. I don't have to kind of learn anything. Now, I've had my practice for 9 years. For the first like 7, especially for the first like kind of handful, if it even sounded anything remotely like an entertainment field, you know, I would do it and then figure it out. I probably did film. I mean, even at the height of that side of my practice, it was probably only like maybe 25%. And then, over the years, it's gotten sort of less and less. It's certainly, I think it's easier to market yourself if you're able to kind of focus on something, but that's not the only way to handle it. And I know plenty of really great solos and attorneys in small firms who practice across the different, entertainment fields, which can be helpful as well for their practice.
Yeah, it's interesting because I do mostly music. And then with television, I'll do like some non scripted deals. But it's when you were reading my bio, it mentioned I had a management company, which I don't have anymore. Because when I first started in the music business, it was at the time when the music business was going down. And I, for like the first couple of years, it was, you know, it was in a good spot. And then because it took this turn, I said that I wanted to diversify and I was going to start getting more into film and television. So I started talking to a lot more people in that space. I didn't realize that music was like the black sheep. It was like no one wanted to do, everyone was like, music, oh, okay, especially people in television and film. So, you know, I thought about getting more into film and television. And then when I started kind of like putting my feet in that, the music business started really picking up. And then as of now, you know, the last couple of years, I've just been so busy. I, you know, am glad that I just, for the most part, have my focus mostly on music and again, like non-scripted television shows for clients that I represent, usually in the music space. A couple of independent producers that work on non-scripted television that aren't related to music, but they're still doing a lot of like reality shows and things like that. Like I'll pick up those things, but I do feel like yeah, I feel like, you know, before I would tell anyone like, yeah, diversify, do TV, do film, do music, do everything. But I feel like finding your area is really good and you can just be great in that one field. And especially with things now, you don't necessarily have to be in, you know, have this expertise in television and music. So,
Yeah, for me, it's you know, 100% music. I think early when I started my firm, and even, you know, even somewhat recently, I would do like corporate formation stuff for my music clients, and now I refer that stuff out too. But you know, you alluded to it earlier when you were talking about my bio, Stacey. But the first 5 years of my career, I worked as a general commercial litigator for a big Manhattan firm, and it was not what I wanted to do at all. And I was trying to build an entertainment practice while I was there, and they just had no interest in doing that type of work. So after about 5 years there, it just made sense for me to start my own firm. So I started my own firm with the vision to practice music solely. And you know, first couple of years was a little bit difficult, but I stuck to it. And you know, while I do have significant interest in film and TV and sports, it's just never been something that I've pursued in terms of my practice. And at this stage, you know, I feel like I have, you know, a very clear yet narrow area of expertise with all things music. So, and I like it that way. You know, I mean, at some point I might want an additional challenge, but I'm also really busy, so I don't know if I have the bandwidth to learn another area of law. So you know, that's where I'm at.
Yeah, and for me, I'll just tag along on that. I agree. You know, my passion resides in music. That's really where I like to live, in this space. But if there are things that make sense for me to translate into other areas of the entertainment business, based on my knowledge and understanding of the music business, then guys, I'm on. Did I lose you guys?
okay.
Otherwise,
Either.
can you guys hear me? Okay.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. Otherwise, I'm more than happy to, send to the right people that can help my clients the right way. You know, being on this panel with the changing of the guard, the younger attorneys that are helping change this stuff. I can tell you personally, and looking at everybody's firm status, we all own our own firms. It's an amazing thing. And for me personally, I won't speak for the rest of the panelists, but for me personally, one of the things that's helped me create and maintain success is knowing when I should take something on and when I should put it to somebody who can make me look good and, more importantly, take care of my clients the right way.
Dope. Vinny, you're all music too, right?
We there?
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of like what Angela said. I've done TV for like non-scripted TV stuff, and then I've helped a little bit with shopping a TV deal here or there, but it's not my primary focus. I mean, and then it's you know it's also that whole thing about, yeah, if enough time goes between doing one of those deals, it's like just having to acclimate myself with that deal and what to look for. It's like, yeah, I mean, so I'd say mostly non-scripted stuff, like if I'm
Yeah.
doing anything outside of music. Yeah.
Yeah, so that, I mean, that's just stressing the importance, I think, of saying, okay, I do mostly music, and people that kind of dabble in a lot of different things, because it's tough to stay on top of everything within one, specific field. So, so let me go to another question. I have someone asked, as a law school graduate trying to break into the entertainment law field, can you discuss some approaches for gaining entry with an entertainment firm, and other opportunities to get into the industry?
I would say most law schools have, like entertainment law organizations like ESOL, right? It's been so long, I don't remember. It's been so long since I've been in law school. ESOL, things like that. I didn't go to a law school that actually had a entertainment law concentration, but we still had like that organization. I think being a part of those organizations are really important, because a lot of times they end up networking with firms and attorneys that specialize in that area. And then also, if you have like your internships, keeping a good relationship with someone that you intern for, because a lot of times, if you have that good relationship, they will want to help you out, like help you find a job, help you, get another internship, things like that. So, the networking is always really good. But also being aware of, you know, uh, wanting to like just network too much, but just finding like the right contact, the right mentor. I think that's really important too.
I want to jump in real quick. I got a good question from Atira that I want to ask. She asked,
Did Stacy freeze?
She might have.
Oh yeah, you're back.
She's back.
oh Lord, I was like, everybody was just frozen. I'm like, so I'll read the question again. Atira asked, what do you think we can do collectively to push the envelope on more collaborative and mutually beneficial contracts being the standard, regardless of the leverage? Does that make
So
sense to y'all?
yeah, and I actually just dealt with that with someone up in Nashville. This guy who he made like quite a bit of money doing something, and he represents some producer now, and they had all the leverage, and he was asking for just crazy stuff, like the producer is going to co-own the master, the artist can only exploit it for 3 years, and then we have to come back and renegotiate with them. And I was like, what are you even talking about? So I had to just kind of, call him and say, look, like, uh, I know that you have all the leverage here, but this isn't a situation that makes sense. It's not going to work out well for your producer client. Certainly not going to work out well for my artist client. And I think if you're dealing with someone who is reasonable, then they'll see it that way and maybe give some. And especially if you're dealing with an attorney who's been on both sides of it, they'll normally work with you. I mean, I've worked with a bunch of different record labels. I do those deals all the time. And then of course I represent artists who are being asked to sign those deals. You know, and so I've made both arguments from the label side and from the artist side. And so sometimes, especially if it's an attorney you have a good working relationship with, you can just sort of like pick up the phone, kind of chat through, and find some middle ground. Like, I know that your client's saying this to you, but the like reality is that, if we give you 25% from the ancilleries, then my client's not going to be able to even make, any money touring. So it's going to have to be less than that, and try to find some middle ground like that. Just picking up the phone really and having a good relationship with the label and whatever the attorney is hugely helpful, I think.
Yeah, I think relationships are definitely key in this business. And and it's sometimes hard, like I find myself like John said, picking up the phone and to get a deal closed. Sometimes when it's not necessary, like sometimes egos get in the way and you find yourself really just arguing with somebody over some BS, and you have to kind of just, pick up the phone and use reason, and I think one of the things that I kind of pride myself on, Matt joked to me about it on Instagram, but like I consider all y'all friends. Like we all have working relationships. We all know each other. We do a lot of deals together, and I think that there's mutual respect there. And I try to gain that mutual respect with everybody I work with. I've put in a lot of time and effort getting to know some older attorneys that many people might consider to be difficult, just trying to form a rapport with them so that because I know I'm going to have to do deals with them and I don't want it to be a battle every single time, but also giving the younger attorneys who I never heard of, respect, and honestly, like I find myself often trying to teach younger attorneys I'm not always going to be your enemy. Sometimes I'm actually trying to help you learn what you're doing, because sometimes people just ask for things in a deal that don't make sense. And you want to just, kind of get on the call and, walk through things and explain things from your perspective or explain things from how you've seen it in the past. And I think that that's, kind of a good way just for, us as attorneys to build this community of entertainment lawyers is to, to help people who are just starting out, even if you can't hire them, answer a question, suggest doing a deal a different way. Like it doesn't always have to be adversarial. Like I was a litigator for 5 years. We used to fight over whether a arbitration was going to be in this city or that city, like they would fight over everything that you could possibly imagine. And I think as transactional attorneys, it is our job to find a middle ground. And obviously you want to represent your client and get what's best for them. And sometimes your client is the one that's being difficult. And then you have to decide if it's your job to temper your client's expectations or convince them to be fair to the person that they're signing, that they're doing business with. But yeah, I mean, I do think that there is, a responsibility for all of us to, try to do good business.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, we're all working with each other over and over again on various deals. So I think trying to be amicable and it doesn't mean you can't represent your client to the best of your ability, but I think also keeping in mind that hey, um, I know this person and my client, they have a position that's not, I'm going to advocate that position, but I don't have to be, a jerk to the other attorney that I'm dealing with because that's their position, right?
Because in the end, at the same time, we work for our client and we have to represent their interests, above anything else, so that's important to remember. But, that question makes me think of like stepped up agreements versus the baseline agreement. And, in my experience, I work I have different roles. And so some people get offended if you send them, say you worked with this attorney before, you negotiated a deal before for one of their clients, right? And then you send them something for another client and it's not stepped up. And so when I say stepped up, just to explain, just the basics, that means having more favorable terms for the client, right? And so if I send for your other client a non-stepped up agreement, some people can get offended by that. Do you agree? And have you ever got offended?
I mean, I actually get offended by it because I'm like, I hate when people don't send me stepped up agreements, but I know I also don't do it sometimes because I'm like, we may have done something and I'm like, okay, what deal was that? Then I have to like look for it. I have to like remember who your client was, who my client was. So it ends up being a lot, but definitely on the producer agreement front, I think all of us have been practicing probably for the same amount of time, right? And I don't know if there's anything that bothers someone more than getting a non-stepped up producer agreement. But yeah.
Yeah, and the one thing about producer agreements that's really kind of frustrating is that there's so many asks that you make as an attorney that you pretty much always get. So, I'm starting to just, when I draw them up, I go ahead and put those in there, because like they really don't make that big of a difference. And if
You're
the other
right.
ask for them,
But sometimes when you send them so stepped up, depending upon who you send it to, you may then still have 50 more comments. So it's like, do I send it stepped up, or do I just send it and let them send the 20 comments? Because if I send it stepped up, I'm going to get 20 more comments. So, it's that's interesting, because I feel like that's something that we all kind of deal with. Because I
forget that some attorneys approach it like that.
Oh yeah, I mean,
that happens. You said something stepped up and you're like, oh, I still ended up getting 20, 30 comments on the producer agreement.
Yeah, let's push
I always like
further.
to reward them for sending a stepped up deal. Like, hey, I was going to ask for this, I wanted 2 reasonablies in there, but I'm not even going to ask for that. Cool, we'll sign. It doesn't matter anyway.
Yeah, I think we might be revealing a lot of the secrets here. I mean, I think, look, sometimes clients hire an attorney because they know that they have a reputation and that they're gonna get a deal done quickly, and maybe that means they're getting the last draft of the last deal they just closed with the other attorney, and they don't have to do anything to it. Then the flip side of it is, why am I paying my attorney if they didn't do anything on this deal, right? So are you paying the attorney because you know they can get you an already pre-negotiated deal, or are you paying an attorney because they spent 5 hours on something? So,
But I feel like the terms, but shouldn't the terms be based on the artist or the producer you're working with, not based on the attorney? So say it's a starting out, say, Josh, I did an agreement with you for a platinum producer, and then another client you have is not, and is kind of just starting out, a few placements. Does that justify me giving you that same agreement for the platinum producer?
I agree. I agree with that. There are 2 things. Number one, I agree with you 100%. I firmly believe that if we're talking about producer deals here, that there's levels, right? There's the just starting out producer has no placement level. There's the mid-level consistent placements. They kind of know their name maybe. And then there's the superstar producer, right? And I think that you have to take into consideration when you're negotiating with the other side who you're dealing with. So if you did a A-list producer deal with another attorney, and then your next deal is for somebody's first placement, then yeah, you don't necessarily need to send the same exact form. However, there's really only about 5 things in the deal that the A-list producer should get that the just starting out producer shouldn't get, right? But there's other things, like John was saying, there's 50 things in a producer agreement that you might change. Those stupid things, like adding the word reasonably, or making sure that they get their producer credit, or making sure that the representations and warranties are mutual, like stuff like that should be in every deal. We shouldn't have to negotiate about that stuff. So that's where I think you should send up a stepped up deal, and then you fight about whether it's album level recoupment or master level recoupment. You fight about whether it's a full rate, no cap on mechanicals, which I don't know how many attorneys are in this room, so people might not have the faintest clue what I'm talking about. But those are the type of high level deal points that we should be arguing over.
But that's what I mean with stepped up. I'm like, it's stuff like that, mutual indemnification. Like, we don't need to ask for that. Mutual reps and warranties,
breach and cure.
Reporting restrictions. Just give us what's in the deal, so I don't have to ask.
Right, come on.
Yeah,
exactly.
But yeah, I think the producer agreement, even though that's the kind of the only thing we talked about, I think is always so important, because that's actually the agreement, I think, and I could be wrong, But someone else may have a different experience with it. But so many sign without an attorney, right? Like producer agreements, or work for hires, or they do a song and they didn't sign anything. But that ends up being something that people don't really realize. I mean, because there's so many producers that they need like a lawyer for. So I think
And
people with that kind of record deal, they need a lawyer for that. But sometimes with producers, they don't know about the producer agreement.
I'm glad that you mentioned that because, I actually typically send out stepped up producer deals when my client can only pay like, maybe 200, 300 for the beat, or nothing, just because I know that the producer, they're almost certainly, especially when they're not getting paid that much, they're not going to go out and hire someone, right? So I kind of feel like if I'm representing on the artist side, the very least I can do is send them something, that is decently well stepped up, since there's no room to hire someone probably.
And I do that with a lot of like some
Oh.
of the production companies that I represent. I always try to make sure that we include the legal fee, because it's like, artists may eventually have an issue with their production company at one point, which happens more times than not. But at least they have that person that can represent them in the deal and even after the deal is signed. I think that's important, making sure that the artist feels comfortable where they can ask questions, and they know they're aware of the pros and cons and things like that. So making sure, even if there isn't any money for certain rights that production companies get, that we paid for them to have a lawyer. I think that's really important. And I always appreciate that when I'm representing an artist that's signing to a production deal too, and the production company says, oh, they'll cover your legal fee. Because if not, it's like, okay, so you're not giving the guy any money, you're not paying for the legal fee, but then you want the artist to sign to you. Yeah, I think that it is a very good gesture when the production company says like, hey, Angela, we're going to cover the legal fee too, so we can make sure that this artist, or even the producer in production deals, making sure that they have, an attorney negotiate for them. So
Yeah, it helps the company too. It was a negotiated form at that point,
yeah.
It protects both sides so much better. Absolutely.
Yeah, because I mean, there are like, I don't know how many different types of producer agreements that you see as far as the form, but I'm starting to see one more than others.
The
Like
brain trust form.
Oh
the
man,
table one.
letting the secrets out.
I'm just, because
I'll
I've
mute
talked to
myself.
other attorneys and they're just kind of talking about more if there's a way to come together and make things, make it a little bit more streamlined, because we're dealing with the same type of terms. But I have another question real quick. Someone wants to know what what you all would consider a fair deal right now, for artist and label and a pub deal, if the talent has moderate leverage. Like what would you say if you had to tell your client, oh, this is a great deal right now, this is a good deal for you in 2020?
The older deals on publishing, they were all co-publishing deals with an MDRC, meaning that you couldn't get past that, each contract year without having a certain number of songs that were released through a major label, right? And
On
then
a physical album.
on a physical album, right.
Oh, yeah.
And like, now we're at a point where, in co-publishing deals, it's where the publishing company takes ownership, and it, a lot of times it's in perpetuity. There forever. There won't be any reversion, so you get some of that ownership back. But what's happening a lot these days, at least from the publishing side, is a lot more admin deals where you're getting the collection services and some of the other services that a publisher might do for very similar money, for just a term of years. And then there might be a certain amount of time after the deal ends where the publisher is still, has the ability to collect or still has rights to exploit the compositions, but you kind of get it all back at some point. Whereas before, that was not the norm at all,
So when Vinny says admin, just to break it down a little bit more, when you have a publishing administration deal, that means you retain all the ownership in your publishing, right? And so that's just way more beneficial for you to have a deal where you, of course, retain your ownership. So if you can get the same amount of money for that, same amount of services, shoot, why not?
In regards to that last comment, Stacey, yes and no. Simply because it depends on what the client really needs. If we need an active publisher and we want to sign, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, signing with the right people and the right place that share the vision and that understand exactly what we're trying to do. If we need an active co-publisher that's going to secure writing sessions and secure synchronization and licensing and secure placements and opportunities versus somebody who has a catalog that's already tracking, and all we need is somebody to administer that and track it effectively and make sure we're getting paid. Those are different scenarios that it might warrant giving up that co-publishing ownership. That's my position on it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I
It's a case by case thing for sure.
right.
But what I was saying was that now you can be in a position where you might speak to two different publishers and still kind of get a similar deal, but one where you maintain the ownership. That's what I meant.
Again, like it's all relative to like the overall deal and who you're signing with and what you're expecting from them. I've done deals where it's a co-pub and the client didn't get that much money, but the publishing company really was very proactive in getting them placements. And, after 2 years or so, we completely renegotiated the deal and it was like 20 times more than, the writer got when he first signed. So things can change. So I think it kind of just depends. There's a lot of different variables that would, make a quote good deal a good deal. But definitely, I think overall we can all agree, all the panelists here, that when it comes to CoPub or admin, well, specifically for CoPub, having a set term period subject to recoupment will be better than, an MDRC deal.
And so
Yeah.
let's break that down. Term period. So that means a number of years instead of being subject to having records being put out, placed on a major label that can extend
But
indefinitely.
that's so funny because when Josh said that, it brought up memories of when we used to do those deals where we would negotiate if it comes out by a major label or if it's sold at least, 500,000 units, on the independent side, it would still be considered, or if there were, if there was a physical release. And, now that never comes up because we don't do those deals anymore, but it was about 10 years ago, but those were points we were negotiating. And thank goodness that we don't have to worry about that anymore. So
Oh yeah, all those percentages of songs, what percentage? So it's really like three, two
They still do
releases
those
if
for
you're a
country music.
producer, so it's really 4 songs, it's really 12 and all that. So yeah. What about on
Yeah.
the artist side or producer side as far as like you feel like is a fair deal right now?
for like record deals,
Yeah.
I think again, like there's so many different things that make a good deal a good deal. Maybe it's less money, but you have, uh, a profit share, or maybe if you just have a royalty deal, but you're getting more money, and that was more important to you. I think the only thing that we probably can all agree with that makes deal with like a major label really good is if they're not aggressive in their 360. But other than that, I think it just kind of depends on, you know, where the artist is. Because I get some clients and they're like, oh, I don't want to take too much money from the label because I have to pay it back. And I'm like, look, like you're doing this deal at the end of the day, and yeah, you may recoup, you may not, but like you want to get as much as you can up front unless you were doing a profit share. But if it's a royalty based deal, like no, but sometimes people, if you just answer these questions kind of, um, as far as making a statement like, oh, well, you don't want to take that much money, or you do want to get as much money as possible, it's not necessarily the best answer because it depends on the overall deal and all the other points. So I don't really like to answer those questions because I feel like sometimes people will get stuck on it and then they carry it along and then they remember it from something else that they do and they're like, oh, well, they said, if I don't take that much money, I'll, that's a good deal for me. And in a royalty-based deal, that doesn't really
So
make a
everybody
difference.
remember, this is not legal advice. We are not representing any of you.
We're gonna send all those clients to you, Angela. Okay,
We're not
don't
even
worry.
lawyers. We're actually
Okay. Angela's my attorney, and she told me to stay.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
What's the next question, Stacy?
So someone at go ahead. Oh, I thought someone was saying something. Someone asked, do you recommend dealing with foreign labels? Dealing with labels in other countries?
I've done those deals before.
It's inevitable too, right? Yeah. Go ahead, John.
You know, it's so funny, like genres, even, you know, in the music space, we were talking about specializing earlier. There's even a lot of difference between the different genres, you know, too. Like I've done just randomly like 3 German metal labels, right? And it's really, really very different. So yeah, I mean, and they have their own kind of ways of doing things over there. So you just have to kind of get used to doing it.
If you're going to do something with a foreign label, definitely make sure you have a lawyer, because yeah, the deals are different. I did a deal with like Island UK, and it was for like an Afrobeats artist, but their deal structure was very different from like how we would do it here. So, you know, again, like I think it's really important to make sure like you have someone who's experienced and can do something for you, because, you know, sometimes I think, you know, if you're not familiar with it, you just kind of end up signing something because you think it's like a good situation for you, even if it's a foreign company. Like you should really be a little bit more aware of what you're entering into. Because I was surprised Island UK that it was so different. Go ahead.
I have actually a question for my fellow panelists. In regards to that, if you're working in a different country or jurisdiction in which you're not already familiar, do you bring on the ground counsel in and co-counsel?
I think it depends on what kind of deal. I think if it's just like a recording deal or a publishing deal where the terms are pretty much the same, I would say no. If it's something more complex, yes. But you may want to be careful about what be aware that the jurisdiction in the contract may be that foreign country, and that if there is a dispute, then
we need that person.
Yeah, then there's going to have to be something that comes up, and I had to deal with something like that where it was something in Germany, and then we had to get counsel out there. It was crazy. It was, and
Right.
so many things are so different in other countries, trying to deal with.
Yeah, I think most of us, maybe not John because he's in the German metal world. I think most of us, are hyper focused on doing U.S. based deals. So, and in certain territories, it's not going to be significantly different. But yeah, I mean, I've done some deals in Germany where I've had to bring in local counsel because they do certain things differently. For example, in the U.S., BMI and ASCAP just collect performance royalties, but the BMI and ASCAP of Germany, GEMA, they collect mechanical royalties too. So if you're doing a publishing deal in that territory, you might want to, be aware of those local customs that are different than the U.S. because you might be giving your client incorrect advice.
And also, like ex-territory licensing too is something that I don't think some people think is going to be an issue, but like governing, who gets what from placements, if the placement originated from outside of that territory, but is worldwide, just dealing with things like that that just don't come up for domestic deals.
And I'm not necessarily doing this, although I've had the option to, is, most of the times when you do a US based record deal, it's for the world. Like there's language in the contract that says it's for, or even the universe, whatever clever wording they decide to put in there. But, sometimes, I've had the opportunity to maybe just do a US based deal and have the client do his own territory-based deals. And ultimately the clients decide, no, we'll just do a worldwide deal. Maybe we want to choose who our UK label will be because that's probably going to be the main other territory out of the US and Canada that they're going to have points of contact with. But it's actually, it's just an interesting thing, because when you're doing these deals, the majors, the US major labels have partners throughout the world that are working your records. And oftentimes, as a new artist, you're not even thinking about who those reps are in those other countries, because you're signing to them too. And I think as you get bigger as an artist, you tend to build relationships in the countries where your product does well. But maybe it's worth considering, if you're doing a very specific type of music, or if you think you're going to be big in Japan, it's excluding that territory from your US deal and doing a direct deal with somebody there.
Yeah, and a lot of times if there's interest, like in Japan, for example, you can associate with sign with a label or a distributor there, get a whole nother advance for that territory, and have marketing support, that's localized. But it's not always easy. There's also language barriers and things like that as well. But sometimes it is beneficial.
I always ask for major foreign territory physical release commitments in the record deal with reversions, which I do more frequently for indie deals, and then it frees them up if they do, if there is some German label or Japanese label that wants, to press like 500 vinyl for the band, we can do that, since this independent record label is not distributing physical, in Japan. So I do always ask for that.
Yeah, I wind up putting release commitments in my deals for foreign territories, but in this day and age of streaming, I haven't had to deal with, so and so wants to, put out 500 pieces of vinyl in Germany or whatever. We need to partner with someone in Germany.
Yeah.
But it is, it's smart to put it in the deal if it does become an issue at some point.
Cool, guys. Well, we are getting to an hour and a half. And again, I just want to thank you all for your time. I know you all are very busy people, have a lot of work to do. I was happy. I was a little bit nervous about the pandemic happening and all that with the music business, but it seems that it's still flowing. Everybody?
Yeah, it's been busy.
Yeah,
Slow
absolutely.
down, right?
I mean, look, none of our clients are touring. Maybe some of them are figuring out ways to do shows on, Zoom or FaceTime or whatever. And obviously there's the whole Versus thing that's happening that's pretty cool, although I don't know if they're monetizing it. Yeah, everyone's putting out music. They might not be touring, but they're putting out music.
So that's one real quick before we go. You brought up a good point, Josh, about all this live streaming and monetizing that. Have you all dealt with anything like that yet? Like, everybody's playing stuff over Instagram Live and, playing all this music. Has that come up yet, or has anybody asked you about that regarding monetizing that music that's played?
I'm working on something right now, a monetization deal with Twitch. So where the client is, performing and doing various, tutorial sessions, different things like that. And there's a monetization aspect to that. So, that's one thing I've seen.
I think we're going to see a lot more of that too, based on where we are right now with quarantine, because, if we have to quarantine again this fall or this winter, and this becomes the new norm over the next couple of years, where we even quarantine, once or twice a year, I think, a lot more deals are going to, start taking place that involve like streaming and, different, like, TikTok is really big now, but there's going to be a lot more companies like that that are going to, take advantage of that space. And, even like everyone knows that touring and performances and all that has, that's ceased right now. But I'm seeing different things about like, these artist experiences that, the artists are trying to monetize, where they're going to do something special or exclusive, or even like Yankee Stadium has some music festival, some drive-in music festival that they're going to do. I saw something about that earlier today. So I think people are going to get creative as far as finding a way to still, have some type of performance, whether it's, you know, in their car, like the old drive-through movies, or, you know, through a new platform. So
His album listening session at a drive-through movie theater.
oh, really?
Amazing.
Listening to be here with y'all.
Who
That's
is?
amazing.
Schoolie.
I saw that. That looked cool.
Oh, cool.
That's Starlight, right?
Yep. What's that?
What did you say, Vinny? You said you had.
Oh no, I was going to mention the exact same event. Yeah, one of my clients was telling me about it earlier today.
What is that?
It's a listening event for Schoolie's album.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Like, but it's a drive-through at a drive-through. Yeah, sorry, a drive-in movie theater.
In Atlanta?
Yeah.
The irony is, one of my other clients did a listening event at that drive-through movie theater about a year and a half ago when there was no quarantine. But
No way.
yeah.
That's kind of amazing.
Pioneer over here. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, okay, thank you guys. If you wanted to say any last words or anything, you know, you're welcome to, about, you know, just the future of music or what you see, and, you know, just if you want to say a last word and we can wrap it up. It can be a quick last word.
I have a last word because I always like speaking. Well, I'm glad that we did this. So thank you, Stacey, for putting this together. Because one thing I always say that I'm going to do is have something like on my Instagram live where I answer questions, and, you know, like producers, writers, artists can kind of join and ask questions. Because I know a lot of people don't have resources to, you know, entertainment attorneys. And even, as I told you before, my dad was in the military growing up, so we never, you know, I didn't know anyone who was an entertainment lawyer or entertainment manager. So I was very far removed from having any resources to the music business. And a lot of times, I'm sure we've all seen this, where you get a client who may have signed something before they came to you. It could be an aggressive deal with a small independent administrator, or, you know, some of these companies that will say, oh, if I place your record for you, half the publishing and half the money, or whatever it is. So that always bothers me. So I really do. I'm glad that we're here, because it's, you know, great minds on this platform right now. We can kind of share our experience and share information, and I think it's so important. So I'm glad that I actually was able to participate in this, because I do want to do something like that more often. Maybe I will do an IG live once a week, every other week, and then have you guys tag in every week or so, when we can do like two lawyers answering questions, because it's important. A lot of people, like I said, they don't have the resources, unfortunately, to us. So
I'm down to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Josh, you said you're in. Vinny, are you in?
I'm in.
John's in. Matt's in.
Let's go.
Call me one day. All right.
Yeah, my last word is that it's so nice to be on the panel. Josh, I was giving you shit on Instagram about us being friends, but it's so nice to see you guys, all of you guys, on the opposite side of the table whenever we get deals in, because things do go fluidly, swimmingly. We all fight hard for our clients, but we're all honest individuals that come from the right upbringing, that have a real passion in this, and it's a pleasure for me to have taken a part of this. Thank you, Stacey, for setting it up.
Thanks, Matt. Agreed.
Couldn't say that any better.
Yeah, exactly. No, I just want to say thanks to Stacey for setting this up, and this is great. It just goes to show like how much can be done during a time like this in a pandemic, where, you know, we can all still be on a panel, we can still be talking to people and answering questions. I mean, I think it's great.
Yeah, thank you, Stacey.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. Y'all take care. I know I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Absolutely. All right, bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Later.